Fortnite is a game full of action, strategy, and electrifying moments. But what if I told you that for some people, the biggest challenge didn't come from the enemies in the game, but from something much scarier? Today, you will discover 3 horrifying stories that happened while players were immersed in the world of Fortnite. Chilling stories that will make you think twice before playing alone at night. Stay until the end, because the last story is so disturbing that it will make you question what is real and what is just a... Fortnite is one of the most popular games in the world. I had always heard about it, but never really cared to play, until my friends insisted I join their squad for a few matches. Evan was the group leader and the most skilled player. Xavier, the second best, brought a relaxed vibe to the team. Braxton, on the other hand, barely spoke unless he needed help. As for me, I was a rookie, trying to figure things out while they laughed and gave me tips. That night started like any other gaming session. We dropped into the map, gathered loot, and followed Evan's lead. But suddenly, Evan's character stopped moving. At first, we thought it was a lag issue, but something about the silence that followed felt wrong. His microphone was on, but he wasn't responding. Then, out of nowhere, a blood-curdling scream came through his mic. It wasn't like he was screaming into it. No, this sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere else in his house. A door slammed in the background, and then silence. I immediately left the game and tried calling Evan, but he didn't answer. After 5 failed attempts, I decided to drive over to his house. When I arrived, the front door was wide open, and all the lights in the house were on. I called his name, but there was no response. As I ventured upstairs, I heard soft whimpering. Following the sound, I found Evan hiding under his bed. He was trembling, begging me not to make any noise. It took a while, but he finally came out and told me what happened. Evan explained that, while we were playing, he felt something tap the underside of his bed. Thinking it was just his imagination, he lifted the cloth that hung over the edges and was horrified to see a man hiding there. Paralyzed with fear, Evan could only scream as the man crawled out, stood up, and walked out of the room without saying a word. Evan didn't know if the man was still in the house, so he called the police. 2 officers arrived shortly after. They searched the entire house, but found no one. That night, I stayed at Evan's house to keep him company, but neither of us could sleep. To this day, we still play Fortnite together, though that terrifying experience is something we'll never forget. Sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if Evan hadn't looked under the bed? I've always been the odd one out in my group of friends. They've been hardcore gamers for years, constantly jumping into Fortnite matches together, while I was never really into it. I'd played a few times and understood the basics, but I wasn't any good at the game. One Monday night, I decided to change that. I hopped on Fortnite by myself, determined to practice and improve. Match after match, I slowly got better. Eventually, I felt confident enough to play with other people, not my friends, just random players online. That's when I joined a duo match with a guy whose gamertag was something like Bob Rocket 16, with a bunch of extra letters thrown in. We didn't do great in the game, placing around 20th. After the match ended, I got a message from him saying I was really good and that we should team up again. Honestly, I hadn't played well at all, so the compliment felt odd, but I agreed to another game. This time, he turned on his microphone. I didn't have one, so I could only hear him through my TV speakers. At first, he was friendly enough, but his tone changed quickly when he realized I wasn't responding. He started saying things like, "Put your mic on," and, worse, began calling me names. His cool guy facade vanished, and I decided this was my last match with him. I was focused on finishing the game and logging off, but then he said something that made my heart stop. He said my full name. Not just my first name, my full name. I froze. I thought maybe my profile had my real name displayed, but no, that wasn't possible. I tried to focus on the game, but I could barely think. He kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. I turned off my console in a panic, relieved when the sound of his voice was finally gone. I texted my friends to tell them what happened, expecting them to share my concern. Instead, they laughed it off, sending LOL and LMAO messages. Annoyed, I put my phone down and switched to my laptop to distract myself. That's when my phone vibrated again. Thinking it was another joke from my friends, I glanced at the screen, but the message wasn't from any of them. It was an unknown number. The message said, "Hi, my full name." Chills ran down my spine. I replied, "Who is this?" and waited. After a long pause, the typing bubble appeared. The next message was even worse. "Is this your address?" followed by my actual home address. I panicked and lied, texting back, "No, that's not my address." Whoever it was never responded again. I started accusing my friends of messing with me, but they swore they had nothing to do with it. Deep down, I didn't believe them, but I decided not to give them the reaction they were looking for if it was a prank. I went to bed, trying to shake off the uneasiness. In the middle of the night, I woke up suddenly, startled by a sound. You know that feeling when you're half asleep, and a noise wakes you, but you can't quite remember what it was. That's what happened. I sat up, looking around my room. Everything seemed normal, until I heard it. A knock on my window. I froze. Instead of looking to see who it was, I bolted out of my room and into the nearest bathroom. It didn't have any windows, so I locked the door and stayed there, shaking. At some point, I must have fallen asleep because I woke up the next morning, still in the bathroom. When I checked my phone, I sent another message to my friends, cursing them out. They thought it was hilarious, but when I saw them in person, they genuinely seemed clueless about what had happened. To this day, I don't know if it was a cruel prank from my friends or if that random Fortnite player somehow got my information and showed up at my house. Either way, I've never looked at online gaming or my own window same way again. My 10-year-old son, Chris, had become obsessed with Fortnite. For months, it felt like all he ever did was sit in his room, staring at the screen. The constant sounds of gunfire, that iconic bus horn, and his headset chatter were driving me insane. I kept telling him to go outside, to take a break, but he never listened. One evening, around 9 p.m., Chris walked into the kitchen and casually announced that he was having someone over. Confused, I asked who it was, and he said, "Some guy from Fortnite. He lives nearby." My heart stopped. He invited a stranger from Fortnite to our house. I demanded to know more. Who was this person? How old were they? Chris just shrugged and said, "I don't know. He sounds kind of old." That was it for me. I told Chris to stay in his room and keep playing his game, but not to talk to anyone. Meanwhile, I locked all the doors, turned on the porch lights, and kept watch by the windows. About 15 minutes later, a car pulled up in front of the house. My stomach churned as the headlights turned off, and I saw the driver step out. It was a middle-aged man, probably in his 40s, slightly overweight. He walked up the pathway and climbed the stairs to the front door. The doorbell rang 3 times. I stayed frozen in place, ignoring it. Then, he started pounding on the door, harder and harder. My heart raced as I tried to stay hidden. When he finally stopped, I thought he might leave. Instead, I saw him glance up at the windows as he walked back down the pathway. But he didn't leave. He went around to the side of the house, disappearing from view. A new wave of panic hit me as I heard the back door being nudged, like he was trying to open it. I stayed perfectly still, praying the door would hold. After a few minutes of silence, I thought he might have given up. Still, I waited in the kitchen, too scared to move. Finally, I decided to check if he was gone. I shut off the kitchen lights, slowly lifted the blinds, and peeked outside. That's when I saw him. His face was pressed against the glass, just inches from mine, staring right at me. I let out a scream, trembling as I yelled, "I'm calling the cops." That must have scared him off because he backed away, walked to his car, and drove off. I watched until his car disappeared down the street. I didn't call the police. Instead, I stormed into Chris's room and let him have it. I grounded him for 2 weeks. No video games, no wireless headset, nothing. I made it clear that he put not only himself, but our entire household in danger. After his punishment, I made him go 2 months without using his headset. Even now, I can't stop thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't been home that night. The thought alone makes me sick.